I think in India, the public discourse on China is far more critical than the official discourse. So I think the policy making, so the policymakers in India, I think, are far more cognizant of the challenges of the worsening relationship. The public discourse is sort of imbued with a strong sense of nationalism, and therefore it's far more aggressive and sometimes unreasonably aggressive. Um, but then that's the product of free media. But the policy discourse, I think,
Well,
is
in
far
China,
more
it's the
nuanced.
same.
Exactly. So, yes, exactly. That's not even a product of free media. But no, I mean, like in terms of the policy discourse, I think it's much more calm. It's much more reasoned. And I think there is a desire for, of course, arriving at a rebalanced relationship with China. But you know, India as a democracy, it's very difficult for politicians to, brush under the rug the death of 20 soldiers, and what that sort of creates. It's very difficult to, every time there is some sort of escalation of the boundary, news breaks, and it fuels this anger. And again, it goes back to sort of India-China history, right? We had a war with each other in 1962, which India lost. And that war has impacted Indian psyche uh, quite clearly over the last 50, 60 years, because it's left this imprint that it is something that we lost because of Chinese perfidy. At one hand, Beijing kept talking about India and China being brothers. At the other hand, it was amassing forces. Obviously, the reality is much more complex, but that sense of Chinese perfidy has had long imprint on the Indian imagination. And what the last 3 years have done with the standoff in 2020 is it's reinforced that. And of course, the Chinese media has been an actor in reinforcing that. Going back to even 2017, India and China had a standoff involving a third country, Bhutan, where their borders have a tri-junction. And it was a 70-odd day standoff. During that entire period of time, the Indian government, I think, issued two statements which were very calm, very sane, saying, look, we want to calm things down. And the Chinese side, on a daily basis, had aggressive statements criticizing India. Chinese state media, Xinhua, in fact, ran a extremely racist video talking about Indians being stupid. All that fuels public imagination, because we're no longer in an era where what you say within your borders stays within your borders, right? What you say, there's no distinction between this is my domestic narrative and this is my external narrative. And I think in doing that, Beijing essentially lost a generation of Indians. Because if you just go back a few years before that, 2008, 2009, you had an Indian prime minister imagining the development of our financial capital, Mumbai. And he would say that I want to make Mumbai into the next Shanghai, not London, not New York, not Paris, Shanghai. We are far from there, where today we don't even imagine any, So Chinese development had this impact on Indian thinking. And it's eroded because of Chinese security actions over the last 6 years, but more intently since 2020.